Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Dave Hirschman. We're just getting set up. I am going to go ahead and ask everybody to let me know they can hear me and see the person on the screen, which is the woman with the cell phone, or I should say flip phone. It must be a very, very old picture. So if you can hear me, see me, put a note in the panel. Instructions for person on the panel. Oh, I see no person on the screen. So let me see. See why nobody can see you. Okay, let's see if the screen is on now. Good. We've got that set up. I want to get one other thing set up. They've actually changed some of the options here, but we have set up the recording, so I think we're all set to go. So we're going to give everybody just another moment or two to get more people signed in, because I think it's just coming on 1 o'clock right now. And we will get started. I think we've got 60 lines open, and obviously a lot of people on some of the lines, so we should have several hundred people on the line today. So good. Anyway, okay, give everybody about another 20 seconds. We're going to get started. Once again, my name is Dave Hirschman. I'm with Origination Pro Mortgage School, and today's program is the economics of home ownership, renting versus owning. We've got a lot of guests on the line today. I appreciate those that have come in. And if you have questions, I want to back up for a second. You can use the panel on your screen to ask a question. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. You're going to find me going through a lot of the numbers and calculations very quickly, because this is not about today you learning. This is about today you understanding. So it's not about memorizing the numbers. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. People are still signing in. They're going to have to join us on the fly because we've got a lot of information to go over. Quick introduction to myself. I've been in the industry for over 35 years, among other things. That makes me old. I started as an originator, producing almost 600 transactions my first 18 months in the industry, including closing 60 in my 12th month. I've run sales forces for large production organizations, directed the sales force for Ellie Mae, written 7 books in the areas of finance, management, sales, marketing, and published hundreds of articles, been director and a founder of a federally chartered bank, and been a keynote speaker at hundreds of industry events. Once again, our website is originationpro.com. I do want to welcome members and guests of the Origination Pro marketing system and our students. Our goal is to help loan officers and realtors become and stay experts and help them market like experts, because experts make more money in every industry. Those who are on trial, the trials are good for 14 days, and you'll have access to all marketing materials. And students of our courses get extended trials. We're not going to spend any time today going over our system, as today is a commercial-free presentation. However, feel free to ask questions at the end of the webinar. And I'd like to acknowledge our the Weichert, Washington Township office that has 20 people in attendance. Thank you very much for that note, Mark. I know they're doing some applause in that room right now. So today, introduction. In this session, we're going to analyze the reasons why people purchase real estate. There's no doubt that a home is the most important investment in a lifetime for most Americans. A home has many economic and social economic advantages over renting. Most loan officers and real estate agents are familiar with these concepts, but the problem is they can't necessarily explain how they work simply to the average consumer. We're going to start with what I call the social economic benefits. The American dream is to own a home. Our focus today is economics, but we don't want to forget that there are many emotional benefits to home ownership, including, by the way, the tendency of the owner of a home to become ingrained in their community. Studies have even shown that children of homeowners fare better than children of renters in the long run. There are many social economic benefits of home ownership. These include security for one's family. There's no landlord to ask you to move or direct you to move. The freedom to choose. You can paint your walls any color or have pets. The pride of ownership. Owners can take care of their neighborhoods and their properties. And safety. Neighborhoods with owners are generally safer than those dominated by renters. I would like to welcome those who just joined us. We still got people signing in. And I want to make sure everybody can still see me okay. I know I just got a couple of messages in about some technical problems. If you can't see or hear, let me know, but I am reading the panel as I go. If you hear me hesitate at times, it also means that I'm reading the panel. So, also like to recognize the Weichert Bowie office that has 15 agents checking in. The focus of today's presentation is not the non-economic benefits, though we don't want to forget those. Today, we're going to talk about the financial benefits of becoming a homeowner. The reason why we all aspire to own real estate is simply this. We desire to accumulate wealth. There's good reason that America has one of the lowest savings rates of industrialized nations, but yet remains the richest country in the world, real estate. Or the best evidence that I usually present, the Federal Reserve Board's survey of consumer finances has disclosed that the average net worth of an owner is over 10 times greater than the net worth of renters. And if you're listening to me and you know owners and you know renters, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. So, what are these economic advantages? I call them 3+1 basic economic reasons for purchasing a home. Those 3+1 advantages, number one, real estate is an investment. Using the concept of leverage, we're going to learn exactly why real estate consistently outperforms other investment vehicles, even in periods of low inflation. The concept also includes the additional factor of principal reduction, or what I'm going to call a forced savings plan. Now, the reason this is +1, because the forced savings plan actually factors into the first reason and the second reason as well. The second reason is real estate is a tax deduction. More and more tax breaks have been cut from the menu in the interest of tax simplification. The mortgage interest deduction has suffered nicks and scratches, but has emerged as a major survival in the world of tax strategies. Though I'm going to have to point out that the recent tax plan has changed the numbers somewhat, and we are going to get into that today because that tax plan is very important. Real estate also is an inflation hedge. Even in times of low inflation, monthly rents move upward much more quickly than a mortgage payment. So let's get right to the new tax law. There's no doubt that the numbers are affected by the new tax law. Now, because the tax law is still new, the final conclusion is not in. Actually, I've read a couple of studies fairly recently about the effect of the tax law, but I think their conclusions are definitely preliminary. The law will affect various price ranges and tax brackets differently. An unknown is how the investment value or other values of home ownership will be affected. So there's one theory that says you may get a little bit less of a tax benefit from the house, yet because people have more to spend, the investment price value of houses will be greater. We don't know that yet. For the reason that the numbers haven't come in yet, we're using the same standard numbers that we use all the time, but we make certain notes where they are relevant. And keep in mind, the numbers we use are simulated examples to begin with. What's the most important thing to remember today is certain of our prospects are questioning home ownership because of the tax law. And the reason that is so important is that they don't understand all of the benefits of home ownership. If they understood all of the benefits, a slight change in the tax benefits would not make a difference. Thus, today, it's even more important for you to be knowledgeable about and to be able to explain all of the economic benefits of home ownership, as well as the social economic benefits that I talked about right at the beginning. So let's get right in to the 3.5 economic reasons. Let's start with real estate as an investment, or what I call the concept of leverage. A little bit of a disclosure here. Any prediction of the future is just that, a prediction. We're not predicting the future here. What I try to do is we try to be conservative with our approach when we use our numbers. You're going to see us use a lot of numbers and a lot of tables, and I'm always going to point to the conservative number, which is the one we're going to use. So what is the concept of leverage? Leverage is the ability to control a large asset with a smaller asset. For example, you can purchase a $200,000 home using $10,000 or less in cash. Now, why can you leverage real estate highly? Matter of fact, you can leverage real estate more greatly than any other asset that exists today. Well, here are the reasons. Real estate assets have a long history of appreciation. That means security for those institutions that would lend against the asset. There's also a complex system to record ownership of property, which is, by the way, older than the United States itself. And there are consistent national standards to qualify purchases of real estate. These standards also reduce the risk that a real estate loan will default. By the way, in the industry, we call these standards underwriting standards, but those standards make it possible to get the leverage that we want. If we didn't have those standards, you might have to put 30 or 40% down to purchase real estate. What do I mean by long-term appreciation? Well, let's just look at the last, 45, 50 years. In 1970, the average median existing home price was $24,300. Imagine that. Today, you would get maybe a garage for that. Today, it's $254,800. That's 10 times as much as 1970. Now, before we get into the calculation, another disclosure. You're going to notice we use $100,000 or even numbers as our base value for a mortgage calculation. This is because I want to keep it simple so that you understand the concepts, because again, this is not about you today memorizing numbers. If you live in a more expensive area, most people do today, you can extrapolate. Take my numbers, multiply them by 3 for a $300,000 home. And of course, closing costs and everything else will vary based upon where you live and so forth. Therefore, I encourage people to do their own analysis based upon the actual numbers of a transaction. Remember, today is about learning the concepts. I'm going to give you a lot of numbers today. Don't get lost in them. So let's look at the return on investment. What I'm doing here is I'm basically taking $10,000 in cash, putting it in a bank or purchasing stocks, whatever you want to do with it, or buying property with it. Again, even numbers, very easy to understand, and you can extrapolate to higher properties. Notice on the chart, I've highlighted 10 years. The gain in cash is $3,000, $3,500 really, and the gain on the property is about $20,000. Now, my assumption is a 3% rate of gain, which is a conservative rate of gain in stocks or real estate, not in the bank today, using a $5,000 down payment, $5,000 closing costs, and $10,000 in selling costs. So I've already subtracted out the cost of selling the house. Now, when you look at this chart, which really just varies the years that you hold the investment, you will notice a few things. First of all, we have about an 11% annual rate of return on a $10,000 investment. That's not bad. But I want to point out some rules of leverage. Number one, the effective leverage will lessen with lower rates of appreciation. That's why I use 3%, which is less than the average that real estate has appreciated in the long run. But even so, at lower appreciation rates, real estate will still outperform non-leveraged instruments. Holding periods, because the cost of real estate acquisition and the cost of real estate disposition, there must be a reasonable holding period for gain on real estate. In other words, we're not talking about house flippers here. We're talking about the fact that if people are buying real estate to live in, they must live in the property for a certain period of time to recognize the gains of leverage. In other words, real estate is not a short-term investment for the ordinary purchaser. Again, excluding flippers. If you increase the down payment the smaller the percentage return on real estate. And then note that the cost of maintenance goes up for existing homes, but starting prices are typically lower than new homes, so it balances out. And we do factor in maintenance because owners do have maintenance into these numbers. That's part of the 10%. Now, that's a very simple concept, and I've already gotten some notes in here. I'm just reading it. Okay, but I'm going to add this half of concept in here because what we didn't figure in is mortgage principal reduction. In addition to the leverage principal, the gain of real estate is increased by a reduction in the principal amount of the initial mortgage on the property. You know, in simple terms, when one owns a house, one builds up additional equity because each mortgage payment reduces the amount of principal outstanding. This assumes that the homeowner does not opt for an interest-only loan, which has been popular in the past, but not as accessible more recently. So I put another chart in front of you. I took a $100,000 loan at a 5% fixed rate, all just completely even numbers. And note, in 10 years, that same homeowner would add another 18 to 19,000 in gains just because of the factor of principal reduction. That's pretty significant because that's almost double what I had in the other chart. I'm going to go back to the other chart. It's almost double. So this is an important part of the equation. Now, this is a more complex chart, but this factors in both principal reduction and lost investment returns that they could have had if they kept their money in the bank or stocks. Notice we keep the home appreciation rate and the investment appreciation rate the same. A lot of numbers on this table. Again, I don't want you to get lost in it. I just want you to go to the highlighted number. Somebody putting 5% down of a loan amount of $95,000 would have a total return of $33,000 over a 10-year period. The calculation is we take the appreciation over 10 years, we add the principal reduction, we subtract out the investment returns, and we subtract out the cost of purchase and the cost of sale to give us the total return on home investment. Now, this is not a chart you would present to a client. This is just for you to understand what it is so that you can talk to the client about, the returns they can be. You can actually scratch out numbers for any particular case with some of the charts I'm going to give you. Now, what we did here is we varied the investment returns and the amount of down payment, but I'm giving you another chart. Again, just look at the highlighted numbers. In this case, I'm varying the holding period. Holding period of 3 years is a loss. A holding period of 5 years is a good, decent gain. Not a huge gain, but a decent gain. A holding period of 10 years is a really good gain. Keep in mind, this is a $100,000 home. So if you're selling a $200,000 home, you would just take those numbers and double it. That's a $60,000 gain. Let me ask you a question, those of you on the line. How many renters do you know gain $60,000 in savings over 10 years, typically? The only way they would do that typically would be participating in a 401k plan, which, by the way, is also a great investment vehicle. So, some great numbers here, okay? Some great numbers here. But what I want to get into here is also, here's the problem. Yes, we have maybe a $60,000 or $30,000 gain in real estate over 10 years. But if renting costs more than owning in the long run, you can basically erase those gains. If it costs them $500 more to own than rent, you do the numbers, $500 times 10 years. Well, that's going to erase pretty much all the gains. So we have to look at the cost of renting versus owning as well. Okay, so let's go back to the forced savings plan. Let's go back to the fact that when you pay rent, 100% of the rent goes to the landlord. But when you pay a mortgage, interest is paid to the lender, but the principal pays down the loan, building equity. So let's look at this. I took a $300,000 loan, in this case, at 5%. The payment is $1,600 a month. That's just principal and interest. We're assuming that the total payment is $2,000, including taxes and insurance. Again, just using even numbers. And we're also assuming that the rent on the same home is $1,700, which is $300 less. So the owner is paying $300 more for the privilege of owning. However, let's break this payment down. In the first month, $360 goes down to pay down the loan. In the 60th month, $460 goes to pay down the loan. So on the average for the first 5 years, basically $400 is going to pay down the loan. So really, they're paying less to own than rent on a monthly basis. Now, we're not going to take these numbers together. Remember, they're included in leverage and they're included in rental equivalency. I'll show you that in a moment. But the numbers are really important for you to understand. Basically, in this case, the owner's paying $1,590 a month after you figure in the forced savings plan. Now, the problem with that is, of course, that is still monthly outflow. They don't get that money back until they sell a home. Or, put it another way, if they stay in the home for 30 years, their mortgage is paid off. They own absolutely nothing. Well, let's transition to the concept of rental equivalency now, because that's where we talk about the payment of the home actual cost on every month. In other words, the monthly cash outflow. The term rental equivalency, which is related to tax savings, refers to the determination of an individual's mortgage payment after the effect of tax deductions. Or another way of stating this in English is, for the rent you are paying right now, you could purchase a home of X amount and keep your payment the same after taxes. And by the way, the same concept can be applied to move-up buyers, because of the increased mortgage payments can also be reduced by the amount of tax savings. We refer this to re-leveraging, or we refer to this as re-leveraging. So let's take a look at the numbers of rental equivalency. We're taking a look at somebody who's paying $1,300 each month in rent, and we're going to assume the house costs $250,000. Even numbers again. Okay, so the rent payment, if you look at the highlighted number, is $1,300. The mortgage payment is $1,600. So the mortgage payment is $310 more than the rent payment. The buyer is going to say to you, I can hardly afford my rent. How can I afford $310 more each month? In order to answer this question, what we have to do is compare the rent payment with the mortgage payment after tax benefits have been calculated. In order to do that, we've got to ask a few things. How much of the mortgage payment is tax deductible, and what tax bracket is the borrower in? And again, I'm going to use even numbers. Here's the good news. Most of the mortgage payment carries tax benefits. So in this case, we're going to take a $237,500 mortgage times 5.25%, and we're going to show that the annual interest is about $12,000 or about $1,000 a month. In this case, $1,040. Also, the taxes are tax deductible. So if we look at it, if you look at the very bottom of this slide, out of the total deductible portion of the payment, out of the total payment, of $1,610, $1,290 is tax deductible. $1,290 is tax deductible. It's not bad. What I do, and I usually ballpark this, is I've done this calculation for a lot of homes, some different than others, but generally about 80% of the total mortgage payment is tax deductible. Now, if there's not mortgage insurance involved, it might be 75%. So we can say 75 to 80% of a mortgage is typically tax deductible. Now, here's some numbers. I don't expect you to be able to follow them again because there's not enough time to do it. So I'm going to point you right to some numbers we're talking about here, or some of the numbers which are more important. We've got the borrower's income. We've got their present tax. We've got their borrower's income after the deduction of the mortgage. Okay, so basically, we take $6,000 minus the deductible portion of the mortgage, and we say that his taxable income has been reduced to $4,700. Well, his new tax is $700 instead of $1,000, so his tax saving is $300. So for this borrower, and this borrower only, or this purchaser only, $1,300 in rent is the exact same as a $1,600 mortgage payment. Keep in mind, these are simulated numbers, but that's all you need to remember here, is somebody's paying $1,600 in a mortgage, he was paying, or they were paying $1,300 in rent. That becomes the equivalent for that person. We've made up the $300 gap with the rental equivalency. And by the way, these calculations come from a tax withholding table. And I'm not going to spend any time on this table, but you can see these tables, which are published by the IRS, it shows when somebody's making $3,000 a month, their taxable income is $3,000 a month, they owe $330 in taxes a month. But when they're, when they make $2,400 a month, they only owe $246 per month. Those are those two highlighted numbers. Now, 2 points about this that are really important without getting into too much complexity here. Number one, I didn't take into account the state tax savings. You also, in most states, get to deduct the state taxes as well. However, because especially in lower priced homes, and especially with the new tax law, not everybody goes over the standard deduction. So I do not figure in the state tax savings in order to figure in what you may lose with the standard deduction. Now, I'm going to cover the standard deduction in a moment when we go over the new tax plan. So, under the new tax plan, we increased the standard deduction to $12,000 for singles and $24,000 for married couples. Let me put it this way. If your interest on your home and your real estate taxes on your home don't come up to $24,000 for a married couple, basically you don't get the benefit of a home. Now, most homes, except very lower price homes, you don't have that effect. But for a married couple or in a lower price home, the tax benefit could be wiped out completely. Though with prices rising, keep in mind there are fewer lower price homes. Now with the new tax plan, those on the upper end of the scale, the $10,000 maximum deduction for state and local taxes, which includes local income taxes, by the way, you get to deduct your state income taxes as well. That will help you get to the standard deduction in most cases. So even if you buy a lower price home, if you make a lot of money, you may still get over the standard. And there's also a $750,000 cap that you can deduct for new loans only. So that will also have an effect. So if you're buying a $2 million home, the new tax plan can hurt your tax benefit. If you're buying a $120,000 home, it also can hurt your tax benefit. Less if you are single versus a married couple. Less if you are single. And again, keep in mind that your state income taxes will help you on that as well. And by the way, here's a little interesting note. You might think they gave Americans a great thing by raising the standard deduction. But remember, they took away your personal exemption, which could have been used even if you didn't own a home. So they didn't really raise the standard deduction as much as you want. If the personal exemption used to be $4,000 or something like that, they took that away when they raised the standard deduction. So it's not a complete benefit. So you do have to figure in the new tax law when you're explaining this to a customer. You just need to know where it does affect lower price homes for married couples and higher priced homes. Those in the middle, if you're buying a $400,000 home, I think the average is $256 in the United States, it has a much lower effect, Now, there's another factor here. That same person who told me I could not afford another $300 a month to buy a home also may not have the cash flow. Well, and this is something I'm not going to go over, I just want to make you aware of. You have the ability to have the up their exemptions with the IRS, with their human resource department to get that $300 back on a monthly basis. So they don't have to wait until the end of the year, unless they want to get that cash flow back. And by the way, when I calculate this for a borrower, and I've done this many times, I use the same tax tables, monthly tax tables, and this particular example shows you the example of moving somebody's exemption who's making $3,000 a month, moving their exemptions from 1 to 3 will lower their take-home pay by basically $100 per month. $100 a month. And again, this is just an example so you can see how this works. Now, on this particular, and this comes from my book of home finance, I use the 25% tax bracket just to show you what a monthly payment on a mortgage and a rental equivalency would look like for most incomes, monthly payment of $800 and $2,500 and a rental equivalency. This is what I call a shortcut chart. Not going to go over this today, just wanted to just see it. If you want access to a book of home finance, either the loan officer who's leading you today has access to it, or you can get it online for free at originationpro.com. Okay, let's go to the last benefit, which is a really important benefit, but it's the one I think I hear people talking about the least, and that is the mortgage payment as inflation hedge. Thus far, we talked about the investment benefits of owning a home, and I've got some comments in here, so I'm just checking the comments. We're going to try to get the questions at the end. But just making sure there's no technical problems. We talked about the leverage, investment aspects. We talked about rental equivalency, and we also talked about the forced savings plan as 3 economic benefits. But here's a big question. What about the affordability of a home in the long term? How does the home stack up against renting 5, 10, or 20 years from now? Here's the good news. As time goes on, home ownership becomes even more and more affordable because the home is an inflation hedge. What's an inflation hedge? Well, do you know what inflation is? That means things go up. When your landlord raises your rent by 5%, well, if you're paying $800 today, which I know is incredibly low, 5% a year over 10 years would make that rate payment $1,300. A hedge is a way of production. Is an instrument of protection. A hedge around the house protects the house against people looking inside. Well, an inflation hedge protects one against the future costs of inflation. How does this work? Again, I have numbers. Why is the mortgage payment an inflation hedge? Well, it's really simple. Because a fixed rate payment is mostly principal and interest, it doesn't change. The only parts of a mortgage payment which changes over time includes the real estate taxes and the homeowner's insurance. And going back to my ballpark numbers, you can see highlighted that typically the taxes and insurance are approximately 20% of the total payment. Okay, so what does that mean? It means if the inflation rate is 5%, again using an even number, the rent will go up 5%, but the mortgage will only go up 1% because only your taxes and insurance are going up. So there's basically a 5-to-1 ratio. Okay, so how does that look? In this case, I used a conservative 3% inflation rate. We know the inflation rate today is below 3%, but the rate of rental inflation has been averaging higher than 3% over the past 10 years. So 3% is still pretty conservative. Okay? I took $1,000 in rent. I took a $1,300 mortgage, and I looked at them both with the same inflation rate over 5 years and 10 years. Let's just look at 10 years. After 10 years, the rent is going to cost $1,344. The mortgage is going to cost $1,380. So, even if you didn't have any rental benefits, you didn't have any tax benefits, you didn't have any leverage benefits, as you go on, owning a home is still going to be cheaper than renting in the long run. This is why you have to talk about all of the economic benefits, not just the rental benefits. I know we like to say home's a great investment, it's a great tax deduction. This benefit is just as important. This is a graph of how rent has gone up over the years. And it's gone up even faster lately. So let's do this next. Let's take inflation hedging and combine it with other effects, including the rental benefit, the tax benefit and the principal reduction, and put them all in one chart, which I'm not expecting you to understand in this quick statement. But by the way, keep in mind, we are recording this, and you will be able to get the recording and look at these more carefully in the future. And all these charts come from my book of Home Finance. So what I put in here in this table is I put the effect of inflation, tax benefits, and principal reduction all in one chart. And I took, again, $1,000 in rent, a $1,300 mortgage. And I want to remind you also that if you're in a higher price area, all you need to do is double the numbers or triple the numbers or 2.5 times the numbers. But look at where you start. You start with $1,000 in rent and a $1,300 mortgage. And then after 10 years, you're actually paying $1,344 in rent and effectively paying, and I you use the word effectively paying because remember, the principal reduction is not a cash flow item, it's what you save every month, comes $723. Here's my point. If you could show these numbers to any prospect who's thinking about buying a home, there is no reason, if they're going to be in that home for a long time, there's no reason that anybody would not buy a home. Think about what you paid for rent 20 years ago if you rented 20 years ago and what the rent is today. You will see that the numbers I'm presenting are conservative. This is exactly the reason that the net worth of owners consistently is many times that of renters, as reported by the Federal Reserve Board. It is also why the dream of home ownership is known as the American dream, both economically and social economically as well. Keep in mind, this chart you're looking at here that has these magic numbers doesn't even include the investment aspects of real estate. Now, it does include the principal reduction. We're doing it on a monthly basis instead. That's why I call the forced savings plan a half, because half of the time I figure it into the investment side, half the time on the monthly savings side. You can't do both sides. You can't use it for both. you can only use it for half of one or half of the other. By the way, my assumptions for this chart, 5% rate of interest, $200,000 mortgage, and real estate insurance at $225. 20% reduction in the mortgage payment due to the tax deduction, which is a 25% tax bracket. By the way, the new plan is a 22% tax bracket, but that's not going to make a big difference. 20% of the mortgage is subject to inflation. So the formula of this chart is 80% of the mortgage payment for tax deduction minus the principal reduction plus the inflationary increase of the taxes and insurance. So with the rent, all I did was apply inflation. But for the mortgage, the numbers are certainly more complex. And, our goal is to help you become an expert so that you can explain it. Now, when we give our first-time homebuyer seminars, and I have a sample first-time homebuyer seminar in our marketing kit, we do not go into all these charts in detail. We explain the concepts. The purpose of the webinar today is to give you more meat behind those bones so that you can become an expert and be confident in this. You don't have to do these calculations. We've done these calculations for you. We've done these calculations for you. So I'm hoping to get some good questions and comments. I think we've come to the end. My last statement is, these are the most important concepts in the world of real estate. Need we say more? And I'd like to get some feedback. Did these make sense to you? So what I'm going to do now is I am going to go ahead and let's see. I am going ahead and just take a look at a few comments we have and questions that we have. If you're in a room full of people, you can have the moderator type these on the screen. Okay. We've got, I'm just scrolling through here. This comment is, okay, need to point out, if using leverage and putting 10 cents down on a $100,000 investment, they will pay interest on $90,000 borrow. Whoop. Sorry about that. I need to expand this so I can read the whole thing. So you really do not have the level of leverage you're talking about. I think, so this was from Robert. He's talked about, you're paying interest on $90,000. However, I think that comment came in at the beginning. I brought those factors in later on with other tables so you can see everything. If I didn't cover that, Robert, let me know. You are assuming, another comment, you're assuming that all the interest in real estate tax is over the standard deduction that a person would pay and so forth. Again, that statement we covered later on. So we got some questions early that I think we covered. Here's another question. Dave, can we have access to your charts or Excel that help create the charts? Believe it or not, I created these charts before Excel ever existed. These concepts are so old, I wrote them when I wrote my book, The Book of Home Finance, 30 years ago. So Jose, in your question, these charts are taken directly from my Book of Home Finance, which you can get directly online at originationpro.com. There's no cost. All you need to do is download them. Or, again, if you're being led by a loan officer in a room full of real estate agents, that loan officer can get that book for you, And I understand you were not expected to absorb these charts that quickly. I did get some nice comments about people who said that that they really understood the concepts that I set forth. I really appreciate the nice comments as well. And I'm going to see if I can do is see if there's any other questions at all. And the answer to the last question is Fred. The answer to the last question is Fred. So, and if anybody wants to know what the question is, you can email me directly at success@hirschmangroup.com or dave@hirschmangroup.com. I get either one. I really appreciate the time everybody spent with us. I wanted to keep this on target time-wise, and I think we finished 5 questions, I think 5 minutes early. Again, I'm getting some nice comments in there. I'm not reading those comments. And the answer to another question is yes, you can get a copy of the presentation. The loan officers who are subscribers, or actually my loan officers at Weichert, will get a copy automatically. Those of you who don't are not being led by somebody, you can go to originationpro.com, sign up for our service, and we will go from there. Just dropped my phone. Hopefully I didn't cut anybody off. No, it looks like it's still going. Anyway, thank you, everybody. That's it. And hopefully we'll have more great information in the future, but I can't think of a topic that's more important than this one. This is the foundation of our industry. These are the concepts all in one place. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.